Good evening. This is Robert Sungenis coming to you live on the Robert Sungenis Live program. I'm glad you are here tonight with me. This is our second night this week, Wednesday, August the 5th. Time is a-flying. It just seems like 2020 got here just a couple of weeks ago, and it's, almost 3/4 gone, if not that already. So, let's make do with the time we have. As you know, I doing this program, and I usually do some what they call house cleaning or whatever, stuff that comes up and that I should be doing before I take the questions. And I haven't done this in a while, and I'm not going to do it tonight, so don't be fearful. But usually I will advertise some of our materials, so because you can't get anywhere without advertising, as they say. And but I'm just going to make it short tonight. I'm just going to say that any of our participants, those who ask questions, or those that don't ask questions and just like to listen, I think most of our audience are just listeners. If not live, they listen by, going to our media outlets and listening to the recordings that we've made of these programs. So there's a lot of people that do that. And it looks like my camera's a little, I've been having trouble with this camera. So yeah, okay, maybe that's a little better. Don't know. But at any rate, what I wanted to say was, here I am moving, excuse me. You can take a visit to our website there at the lower left-hand corner. It might be your right-hand corner, I don't know. I know these cameras do a lot of switcheroo, but anyway, it's there, visible, clear as day in blue with white letters, spelling out robertsungenis.org. If you would, take a visit and see our materials. We have tons of books, all written by me. Yeah, I don't advertise anyone else's books. Not that I think that I'm, better than them or they're worse than me. None of that, because once I start, then I get constant requests, would you put my book in your website? And you don't see a lot, hardly any of on our website where we have links to other websites. We don't have that either, because although I've gotten many requests for that, we just don't do it because it just becomes too cumbersome, and then putting books up there, that becomes too cumbersome. Who's going to get what? How are we going to do it all? And so I just don't bother with it. I don't put my books on Amazon either, if you've noticed. We used to do that, but don't do that. And now we don't do that. And, I don't go on Twitter, Facebook. I'm rarely on unless somebody types in my name and it happens to pop up in my email. I'll go to Facebook and see what's happening there. But by and large, we just don't get involved with all these, media outlets, and I know that's not good, so I'm not proud of it. I'm just saying, if you've wondered why, it's because I just don't have the time for it. I just can't get involved with all that stuff. The more I get involved with that stuff, like, for example, this program here, Jonathan takes care of that for me. He does all the legwork, and I don't have to do anything. It just appear. And if he didn't do it, I wouldn't have this program. So he offered to do it out of the kindness of his heart, and so he does it. But if all I have to do is appear, it's almost guaranteed that I'll do it. If I have to do any other work, it's almost guaranteed that I won't do it. So it's just me, just my quirk, and but my time is very valuable. I have 11 children, and I've got 7 of them still at home, ranging from ages 10 to 19. And so, the Sungenis household is pretty busy every day. And so I have to, guard my time as much as possible. And the kind of work that I do is very intensive, as you can tell from the materials I put out. It's very detailed, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of concentration. So in that respect, if I get involved with something else that's going to suck up my time, I won't get my work done. You won't have half the stuff that I put out. So I made a decision a long time ago that I have one goal, and that's to get my work done, and come what may, if it gets out there, it gets out there. And the Lord has seen to it that I've had many, many, many people come along and want to do the legwork on certain things. And so I'm happy that happens. And anyway, so I just wanted to explain all that to you. Not that you really care, I'm sure, but I just thought some people may be intrigued. How do you, because that's a question I get a lot from people, is how in the world do you get all this work done? How do you keep putting out these books, 2, 3 a year, movies, 1 maybe or 2 a year, answer questions, blah, blah. I just saw a comment from Lawrence. He says 12 children, including me. Yeah. See, I keep trying to get Lawrence to grow up, but he just won't do it. He's just like, what, Peter Pan or whatever. And, but he's adorable though, isn't he? All right, Lawrence. So we, again, this program is set aside for you to ask your questions, give your comments on any subject of interest to you, as long as it's decent. And I will endeavor, as host of the program, to answer your question to the best of my ability, from our Catholic faith, from the Bible, from our tradition, from the stack of books I have back here. I don't know where I'm going to get the answer, but I'm going to try to give you the right answer. And the most likely source of the right answer is in our Catholic faith somewhere. And if it doesn't touch on the subject, then it's probably not important. So, at any rate, we do have a lot of questions from yesterday that I'm supposed to do, and so I have to go find out now where they are. Not that one. Darn. Okay, so here are the questions. I just found them. Let me try to get to a couple of those. And I just want to let you know, I'm very tired tonight. Man, I couldn't get to sleep last night for some reason. And woke up, had a really bad dream, woke up, you ever have one of those dreams where just, it's like from 30 years ago, something happened 30 years ago? So maybe some of you aren't old enough to have a dream like that, but I am, and maybe something I didn't do 30 years ago, and it's haunting me back in my subconscious. But I had a dream about that, and it's the weirdest thing I've ever dreamed in my life. I think 90% of my dreams are just weird. At any rate, that kept me up. But I had a lot of work I had to get done today because I'm making another movie, and man, that just sucks up the time. So I really got tired. So if I look tired, if I sound tired, that's the reason. Just wanted to let you know. But I will trudge through it, and we will start with the questions from last night that I didn't get to. Someone says, what do you make of Pius XII's statement that encyclicals are of the level, he who heareth you heareth me, in Humani Generis? This seems to imply they are infallible, since Christ doesn't lie. Well, you know, there's always been a confusion about what it means to be infallible, as opposed to, non-infallible or fallible. There's a distinction right there. You see, non-infallible, you would think, is almost the same thing as fallible, but it's not really, because the document can be non-infallible because you didn't make it that way, but there's a lot of things in the church that can be fallible, whether we want them to be or not. Okay, but basically, and you're right. When Jesus says and that's the way the Pope is using that. When Jesus says, "He who hears you hears me," yeah, it does put that on that level. Okay. So it doesn't mean that when the Pope says something in an encyclical that it's automatically fallible. Okay, I think that's a good distinction to make. Because some people will think that, well, if it's not infallible, then it's fallible. So there's something wrong with it automatically. Well, no, it doesn't mean that. You could have an infallible encyclical just based on the nature of the encyclical, that everything he writes in the encyclical is true and trustworthy. There's no error in it, no lies, no exaggerations. And so by the very nature of the encyclical, if it doesn't have any error, then, it deserves a status right up there with something that we say is infallible. Okay. And so that's one thing we need to say. And I think that might satisfy your question. But here's the other side of the story. When we say that a document's infallible, what we're doing is we're putting a legal stamp on that document, an official proclamation that this document is infallible. You don't have to do any guesswork. Like with Humani Generis, you could go in and examine it yourself and go througit, if you're qualified, and you could say, well, I've read it, I don't see any errors in it. And you could be making a factual statement, okay? Even though you don't have authority, you could be making a factual statement about Humani Generis. It doesn't have any errors in it. And so if it doesn't have any errors, then is it not on the same level as being infallible? Well, yes, it is. Okay, but unless the authority that wrote it says this is an infallible document, then we don't have an official legal proclamation that it is in that category, regardless of what you think. Okay, because you may read Humani Generis and think, oh, here's an error here. Okay, but if the Pope had made that infallible, it doesn't matter what you think. Okay, he's the one in authority. He puts his stamp on it. Okay, so like when Jesus said to Peter in Matthew 16, he says, whatsoever you bind shall be bound in heaven. So, in other words, that word whatsoever, aeon in the Greek, means whatsoever. So in other words, Peter can make a distinction and say, okay, this document that I wrote is going to be on this level. And I'm going to call it, dogmatically infallible. And then he can say, this document here, I'm not going to put that on give my stamp of infallible, not because it has any error in it, okay, but because of some kind of legal protocol, some kind of church protocol. This document does not reach the level where the final thing has been said, or there may be more to come later. And so I'm not going to make it dogmatically infallible, although what I'm saying here is all true and trustworthy. Okay, so there may be contingencies of why he doesn't make a document infallible. And and more or less that's reserved for only the special issues of the day, so to speak, where it's been a controversy for a long time, and it's been brewing in the church for a long time. It's been argued about, it's been disagreed about, and finally the church says, all right, we're going to tie the ribbons on this one, and no more controversy, because that's the last thing the church wants is controversy in the church. And, they did that with the canon of Scripture. For years, we had various councils give their canons of the Scripture, and not surprisingly, they're all the same. They all had 27 books for the New Testament, 39 for the Old, and 43 for the Old, and what did I say? 46 for the Old. See, I am tired. And they all believe in the same canon, but it was never put to the level of being an infallible dogma of the church until the Council of Trent, 1563 years later. Okay, so you could look at the Council of Rome back in 380 that had the same canon, and you could say everything there is true and trustworthy. You see, so in that sense, the Pope could say, "He who hears me, hears you, hears me," and use that statement from Jesus in 380 AD for the canon of Scripture. Okay, but then 1,200 years later, now we have to put it up on this level, dogmatic, infallible level, because there was controversy going on. The Protestants were disagreeing with the canon. Martin Luther, it's one of the first things he did. Even one of our own, Cardinal Cajetan, disagreed with the canon. And so we have to nip this thing in the bud. It's one thing to start attacking the interpretation of Scripture. It's another thing to say, this isn't Scripture. And we can't have that. Okay, so that's why that issue became such a whirling dervish that had to be settled definitively, so that someone could look at that and said, oh, the Pope made this one dogmatically infallible. No questions asked anymore. Hands off. We know what that means. Okay. So therein lies the distinction. Okay. I hope I've explained it well enough, but in the kind of world we live in, this is the kind of thing you have to have. You have to make certain authoritative levels of distinction depending on the circumstances that you're in. Okay, so if those circumstances get real hot and there's a chance for schism or there's a chance for people sinning, then yeah, okay, now we have to raise it to this level and make this definitive. So nobody has any questions. It's all understood now, you see. So that, church is like a pastor, like that, like a mother, a father, you have something on the pot and it's cooking, but every once in a while you got to watch it. Make sure it doesn't boil over, make sure you put enough salt and pepper in there, because you set it on the table and nobody likes it. You haven't really accomplished anything except make everybody angry. And so, the church is like that. She's got to watch her own doctrines. And they're on the stove sometime, and he has to make sure when people eat from them, they're getting the best nourishment they can, and it tastes the best, and blah blah blah. But there's a lot of things that can upset that. Okay, so in other words, the church is an organic institution, and she has to watch her growth and make sure that the plants are growing right, they're watered right, they get enough fertilizer. And all this, and she sees something that's not right, then she's got to come in and fix it. Okay. And that's usually why we make dogmas infallible, is because something went wrong somewhere and we got to go in there and fix it. And this is the way you fix it, you see. Okay. But it doesn't mean, that it's any truer than another statement that's true. If it's true, it's true. Okay. It just depends on what level, the cultural, dogmatic level, not the cultural, the dogmatic level the church puts it on because of the cultural problem that it's having at the time. All right. I think I've answered that enough. Let me move on. All right. What I don't understand about geocentrism and Newton is even if the solar system was the only thing that existed, the Earth wouldn't go around the sun. They'd still both go around center of center of mass. Well, true. But, after you get done with the technicality of the center of mass, you're left with which one is going around which one. Okay. So in the Newtonian, because it's limited to the solar system and you don't have any external forces coming into the solar system from the universe, okay, then everything has to be based on what has the highest mass or the greatest mass. And that, of course, would be the sun. And so to answer the question, which one would go around which one, it's not the sun that's going to be going around the Earth, because the Earth is a mere fraction of the mass of the sun. Okay, so the Newtonian system in that sense is going to say that of the two possibilities, the only one that's possible is for the Earth to go around the sun. Now, if you want to get technical, you would say, well, it's not really going around the sun, but in a sense it is, because in 365 days, it's going to go around something and come right back to the beginning of where it was 365 days before. Okay, so and what is that thing that it went around? Well, it was the sun. Now, it may not be exactly at the sun, the center of the sun. It's going to be the center of mass between the sun and the Earth, but that's okay. Okay, so, you can get technical about this and say center of mass is the difference, but in reality, when you're trying to teach people, because that's the way they think, the Earth goes around the sun because the sun's bigger. Okay, well, that leaves out the rest of the universe. Okay, that's how we initiate the conversation. And then we can explain all the ins and outs of that, as you have mentioned here. All right. Okay. Let's see if there's any more questions here. Why did the Romans adopt Christianity since they were originally followers of Mithraism? Well, it's because the church sent out missionaries to preach the gospel to the Romans. I mean, Paul himself, he made a dying effort to get to Rome. So, and as a matter of fact, he was in Rome twice, and the first time he thought he might lose his life, but it didn't matter to him because he got to preach the gospel to the Romans and had to stand before the emperor. And at that time, the emperor let him go because that wasn't Nero. And but he said, "Hey, I'm just tickled pink that I can stand here before you and tell you about Jesus Christ." And the emperor there, surrounded by all his guards. Paul became a very popular item in Rome. Very popular. As a matter of fact, that's why a lot of the people that he writes about in his epistles, who he says are slighting him or treating him badly or whatever, are all from gospel preachers like him who were jealous of his celebrity in Rome. Okay, that's how popular he was. Because he was a Roman citizen and he was a Jew and he was a Christian. Oh, and he was a very intelligent man and a nice guy. Okay, you read his letters, man. You're dealing with a gentleman here. I'm just amazed at Paul's inner personality. So, he's the seed of it all. So he's preaching in Rome, of all places, to the emperor himself and everybody surrounding him. So you can imagine this guy's going to have some influence. And he certainly did. Even into the Jews. He didn't have much success with the Jews in a lot of places, but in Rome, he had great success with the Jews. Converted a lot of them. As a matter of fact, that's why the book of Hebrews was written, because he had converted so many Jews that when Nero got in place, Nero the Roman emperor, and started persecuting and killing Christians, well, all these Hebrews now who had converted, they're all worried, like, oh my gosh, what do we get ourselves into with this Christianity? And they think they're going to be the next victims of Nero. So Paul writes the book of Hebrews and says, that's not a solution. Going back to Judaism is not a solution for your problem. Let me tell you why. And so he writes all 13 chapters of Hebrews to tell them why. And by the time he's done, it's like, wow, okay, I get it now. And, I'll remain a Christian because I see not only why I'm a Christian, but I see the consequences of not remaining a Christian. So this guy had influence all over the place. And he had 3 missionary journeys. The last 2 were the most involved. The first one, he just went to Galatia. And the other ones, all around the Asia Minor area, Greece. He went to Spain. So he's hitting as many places as he can. So that's why Christianity grew, because of that man. Okay. That's why Jesus wanted him. All he had to do, Paul was heading one direction. All he had to do was turn his horse around, head the other direction. And man, he became one of the greatest saints for Christianity we've ever had since. There's been a couple that competed with him, but he was one of the best and totally dedicated to his job, along with being a nice guy. But yet, when you were, naughty, and he had to write you a letter, he made no bones about it. He told you what you were doing wrong, but as a father to a son, not a tyrant. So you could just see the love flowing out of Paul, that he really felt for the people. He really understood what Christianity was about, and he also understood what the evil was about and why he should stop it. So with that combination, yeah, I'm surprised the whole Roman, peninsula didn't convert. At any rate, that would be the answer to that question. So now, all right. So, Dr. Sungenis, have you read The Ways of Mental Prayer by Vital Lahode, or Lahode. It put me at so much peace reading the letters in the forward about the world, reminding me it's always been falling apart. Yeah, it's good to read a work like that every once in a while, huh? Somebody reminds you, you think you live in such a different time. Let me tell you what happened in the 1400s, or the 700s or whatever. Yeah, the older I get, the more I appreciate, is that the right word? The less I complain about my life and all the stuff that I had to go through, and some pretty, serious stuff that sometimes I don't even want to talk about it, that I've had to go through. And then I look at other people's lives. The older I get, the more in tune I am with other people's lives. That usually happens when you mature, And, I've reached that time in my life where I look at other people's lives and I'm going, wow, what suffering they must be going through. And there's nothing I can do about it, except maybe give them a kind word here and there. But I just marvel at that. So the same thing with times that we live in, we think our time is so bad. You know what? We've lived in one of the best times the world has ever known, with all the technical advances that we have. And of course, with them come the misuse of those technical advances, like the atom bomb and all kinds of things like that. But the comforts, the house that I live in here is a palace compared to what somebody in the 1400s lived in. I mean, I live like a king compared to what they lived in. So there's no comparison. I may be more worldly in tune because we get messages within half a second from across the world, whereas in the 1400s, they didn't know what was going on except in their local community. And, if you wanted to ride a horse, and go 10, 15, 20 miles, so be it. But as far as you knew, your little local world, there was all you knew. So in that sense, maybe it was better, for them. You didn't have to worry about the rest of the world. They didn't know what was happening in the rest of the world a lot of times until it started knocking on their door and taking their property or taking their kids or burning their fields or whatever. But things were a lot different. But as you say, I never did read this book, so Ways of Mental Prayer. But I think it's always good to be reminded that the world has always been falling apart, bit by bit. Someone here wants to know if I'm a traditionalist. Well, I don't like to put labels on myself. Okay, what I would say is there are a lot of traditional viewpoints, doctrines, ways of dealing with the world that have been passed down in our Catholic tradition that I very much appreciate. Because I'm not going to go reinvent the wheel every day and try to figure out, the answers to age-old questions that have already been answered for me. Okay, so in that sense, I'm a traditionalist, because that's one of the first places I will look to how was this handled before, and officially how did the church handle this? And that's not hard to find. It's easy to find, and so there you have it. That tradition has been passed down to us. So in that sense, I'm a traditionalist. Okay, but I'm not a traditionalist in the sense where you have to follow the rubrics of whatever traditionalists do. You have to have the Latin Mass, or you have to say the prayer this way, or you have to understand everything through the eyes of Thomas Aquinas, Not that I have any problems with Thomas Aquinas, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm much more open in those areas because I am not going to the whole regimen of ritual. I appreciate it because it's been passed down to us, but I am a little leery of people who say, well, you're not a good practicing Catholic unless you follow these rubrics that we follow in the liturgy, or looking at Thomas or whatever. I'm just using those as examples. There's hundreds of things that I could put in those categories, but so that's why I don't assign myself with any group. I'm just an independent thinker, and I do things the way I think best, and I don't want to be confined by any group. And because some of the groups that I had been in earlier in my Catholic career, wow, they turned out to be not so good. Okay, so I've always been leery of them, and especially in the days that we're living now, with our church leaders being under suspicion for not living the Catholic faith, not teaching the Catholic faith correctly. Our bishops in the United States are horrible. I think I can name 5 good ones on this one hand, and our universities, Catholic universities, colleges, even high schools, they're I just had a letter from somebody about Notre Dame and how far that's gone downhill. Used to be one of the best Catholic universities, but you can hardly find the Catholic faith there today. They go through the rituals and all that, but I'm talking about their whole mentality, what they're teaching these kids, and it's allowing homosexuals and abortion and contraception and women's liberation and all kinds of things that would have never seen the light of day, 50 years ago. I'm going on and on, but I think you get the idea of what I'm talking about. Did you know that there is 600 plus years of error in world chronology? Never heard that before. You mean we're missing 600 years, or 600 years has been added? Is that what you mean? Well, and I'd have to see it. I can't say I've read Vedvir Ira's or Arya's works. No, I haven't read them. So I can't comment on it. Sorry. But I've heard some of these things before. I haven't heard the number 600 before. That seems way out. So I think he'd have a lot to prove there. But they've attacked the calendar before, and every time that they have analyzed this, they always come back that we're pretty right on track with the calendar that we have. So it's not like I haven't visited the subject before, but I haven't seen this man's work. So, don't be shy. I mean, if you want to give a, 25 word or less summary of his main point, what's his main point? Why does he say 600 years are gone? Usually, you can boil those books down to 1 or 2 sentences. Here's his thesis. They call them an abstract when you write a scientific paper. And it's usually just a little paragraph about what we found, how we found it, and what good is it going to do us in the abstract. So don't be afraid to write a little abstract if you want me to look at it. I'd be happy to do that. Okay. His works also show that our world chronology is older than 4000 BC. Well, that wouldn't surprise me. If you go by Ussher's chronology, Adam was created 4004 BC, but he's got a few problems in his chronology. And unfortunately, our old Douay Reams Bible has Ussher's date in the Bible. I don't think they even investigated it, but that he was the most popular chronologer of his day in the 1600s. So everybody took his date. But there's like all kinds of competition on that date. And Ussher, Bishop Ussher, Anglican bishop from England, he, for example, had, instead of 430 years for the Israelites being in Egypt, in Exodus 12:40 says they were in there 430 years to the very day. Okay, so that means it's rock solid timing. God let them out to the very day 430 years was up. Okay, so that's pretty precise. But Ussher says they were there for 215 years. Okay. I know where he gets that figure from, but I don't think it's correct at all. So that's going to affect his date. See, because we have to work backwards to get to 4004, his date. We have to find a solid date in the millennium before Jesus. And one of those solid dates is 931 BC for the foundation of the temple. And pretty much everybody uses that date. And it's like 930, 931, right in that time period. And so from there, then you work backwards. And if you use 215 for the years that Israelites were in Egypt, then of course you're going to get to a wrong date because it's 430 years, and you have to use that date whether you like it or not. And I don't know why he wasn't exposed for that as much as he should have been. But yeah, so, and some of our fathers go back to 5000 BC, 5500 BC. Because some of those texts in Genesis 5 and 11 are, a little harder to deal with. And we have three different texts. We have the Masoretic text, we have the Samaritan Pentateuch, and we have the Septuagint. So, and unfortunately, they have some discrepancies in there. Okay. And anyway, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, if it's more than 4,000. Do you think the church should allow mixed marriages between Catholics and Protestants? No. See, this is one thing tradition gives us. I'm not a traditionalist, but this is one thing tradition gives us. Never been the practice before. Okay. But now in the 20th century, since these popes now want to engage in ecumenism, well, what do you think is going to happen? You engage in ecumenism, and you're only, originally you were only supposed to engage in the ecumenism, quote, quote, in order to convince Protestants to become Catholics. Okay. Now we have ecumenism because, well, they have truth too, we should mingle with them and make some kind of hybrid, where we all understand each other and we're all on the same path to Jesus and blah, blah, blah. They may or may not be the Protestants, okay? That's for Jesus to judge. I'm not judging their hearts. I'm just saying, if you want to keep the purity of the Catholic Church, well, you got to limit your ecumenism, okay? And it can't be, well, now they're going to be our best friends and we'll exchange ideas with them. And before you know it, your church becomes half Protestant. Your Catholic Church becomes halfway Protestant because you've exchanged so many ideas and everybody wants to be polite to one another. And, it never used to be that way. Okay. Our tradition was not that way at all. The Catholic Church was kept pure, just as pure as the Israelites were in the Old Testament. God told them not to fraternize with nations of the world. Why? Because they would corrupt you and make you worship their gods. I mean, God says that over and over and over again in the Old Testament. Look at Solomon, for example, the guy who built the temple in 931. Okay, the wisest man in the world started marrying women from other nations, and lo and behold, they brought their gods into the household of Solomon and worshiped them. And Solomon, you know, what's he going to do? He married these women. He married what? 700 wives, 300 concubines, or was it the other way around? I forget. But man, this guy was a mover and shaker, to say the least. And invariably, what's going to happen? Yeah, he's going to be influenced by them. And so he ends his life in apostasy. In 1 Kings 11, you can read all about it, because he worshipped the gods of the nations that his wives brought in. So this is what happens. So in a marriage, come on now, you're talking about a marriage? It's one thing being friends with the Protestant or, you know, but a marriage, you know, marriage is for life, okay? And then you have kids coming from those marriages, children, and you have to teach them. Now, of course, someone will say, yeah, but, you know, if they do marry a Protestant, they have to promise that they're going to raise them up in the Catholic faith. Yeah. You know, I would say this. I would say, if the Catholic isn't strong enough about their Catholic faith where they can find another Catholic to marry and doesn't marry a Protestant because of the danger of being led out of their Catholic faith, what do you think this Catholic's going to do with the children? If he or she is not so worried about their own Catholic faith, are they going to be that worried about their children's faith that they have to, that they think it's a dire necessity to raise them Catholic? Yeah, well, you're taking a lot of chances there. If I were the pastor of these people, I'd give them the statistics on that. Okay. Things are all nice and rosy when they begin in a marriage. Okay. It's hard work after the honeymoon's over. And, yeah. So there you have it. Tradition tells us no, big no on that question for many, many reasons. I've given you some of them. Okay. All right, let's move on. Okay. At the end of Nostra, I hope this is a question. At the end of Nostra Aetate, it says, it is against the mind of Christ to discriminate against anyone on the basis of religion. This appears to be a blanket statement. How do you interpret? Well, you see, this is one of those statements of Nostra Aetate, and there's a few in Nostra Aetate. Like, for example, Nostra Aetate will say, the Buddhist searches for the divine in his religion. Okay. All right. So someone can take that statement and say, Nostra Aetate teaches that the Buddhist can find God without the Catholic Church. But that's not what Nostra Aetate said. It says the Buddhist searches for the divine in his religion, something to that effect. Okay. Now, someone a little bit more not ready to judge, let's say, could say, well, Nostra Aetate is just making a statement of fact. The Buddhist does search for the divine in his religion. If he's not searching for the divine, what's he searching for? Okay? If he does, then he's not a religion. Okay? That is a fact. The Buddhist does search for the divine. Here's the next question, though. Does he find the divine? The answer is no. Okay, he may think he finds the divine, but he doesn't. And that's where we come in. Okay, so we come in and we say, no, you're not going to find the divine in Buddhism. We're going to say, here's the divine. And we give him the gospel of Jesus Christ. Okay, so unfortunately, Nostra Aetate and a lot, about 4 other of those documents were written in that way, and I've made a big deal about this on the show, that a lot of those statements were ambiguous. You can take them one way or the other, okay? And that God allowed that to happen, to trap these people. Because let's say you're a liberal-minded Catholic and you really don't like the traditional Catholic Church, and you want to change things. You want to open up the Catholic Church, and it's so stifled and primitive, and this bunker mentality that it has, and all that. It can't live in the real world like that. That's the way the liberal thinks. Okay, so he's going to take that statement that I just stated. The Buddhist searches for the divine in his religion, and he's going to say, see, the Vatican II teaches that you can find Jesus Christ through the Buddhist religion. And if it's through Buddhism, then you can find it through Shintoism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, all the isms. You see, that's the mistake they make. And they got caught. They got trapped because of the way that language was written, of which many of them approved. They now fall into the very thing that they thought they could avoid. And that's what's happened to scores of these theologians when they read Vatican II. They think Vatican II is teaching something, and it's not, but they interpret it that way. And so now we have an ecumenism that includes all the world's religions. So what do you think led John Paul II to have his Assisi interreligious prayer meetings in 1986, where he invites the Buddhists and the Zoroastrians and the Shintoists and the Taoists all to come to Assisi in Rome under, Roman Catholic Church land and pray to their false gods for world peace. Yeah, he's one of the very ones that was trapped by what Vatican II said. Okay? So basically God says, look, that's what you want? Yeah. Well, we'll allow the Holy Spirit to put it in there. It doesn't mean what you think it means, but you're going to interpret it that way. I remember giving the example of the divorce law in Deuteronomy 24. If I haven't mentioned it recently, let me do it again. Because the Israelites were all clamoring for divorce. God hated divorce, but they loved divorce. And boy, they just loved to hop and skip around and, take any wife they wanted. And so it became a real problem early on. I mean, they were hardly in the land of Canaan, and they're already having a divorce problem. Okay? You would figure these people just came out of Egypt under treacherous conditions, went through the desert for 40 years under treacherous conditions because they were constantly being punished for their sins, and they're having a divorce problem. It's like, so it got so bad where Moses, of course, talked to God about it, and God says, yeah, give them this divorce law. Tell them they can divorce. And so he put a word in there, and it says, you can divorce for an ervat dabar in Hebrew. That's the way it's pronounced. And ervat dabar, everybody's scratching their head. What's an ervat dabar? And they couldn't make sense of it because, in literally speaking, it would be translated nakedness of a thing. Well, what's nakedness of a thing? Who knows? Okay. You would think maybe it has something to do with fornication because that's nakedness used in the wrong way, and that's fornication. But that's not what the thing said. It said nakedness of a thing. If you wanted to say a matter of fornication, you would say dabar irvat instead of irvat dabar. And so God switched the words around to make them nonsensical, and you would think that you might know what it means, but you're not really sure. And so they were divided into two camps: the camps of Shammai and the Hillel camp. Later on, many years later, these rabbis trying to figure out what it meant in Deuteronomy 24. And you had the conservative camp. I think that was the Hillel camp, and then the Shammai camp were the liberals. And the liberals, of course, do what liberals do. They want freedom. And so they interpret Irvat Dabar as being anything that you could think of. You know, my wife didn't sweep the floor correct today, so I can divorce her. She didn't cook a good meal last night, so I can divorce her. Okay? Because the statement, Irvat Dabar, was ambiguous. Nobody knew what it meant. But the more conservative branch of the Jews said, oh, no, because it used to be just you could divorce your wife for fornication. And that's probably what it means here, although it's not definitive. But that's the way we're going to interpret it, because that's what the tradition told us that it has to mean. And so they went off. And boy, this is exactly what happens today. It's exactly what happened with Vatican II. You have an ambiguous statement. The conservatives go one way on it. The liberals go another way on it. And the two have not met in the middle since. Okay? And I believe that's all from the hand of God, because the Holy Spirit's the one behind Vatican II, and he allows that language in there. Why? As I said, to trap these people in the very sin that they wanted, which is exactly what happened to the Israelites. They wanted divorce. God said, sure, you can have it. I'll even write a law that says you can have it. I'm not going to make the law say exactly what you think it should say, but you're going to think that it does say that, because your heart is hard. And boy, if your heart is hard and you're up against God as your competition, look out. You're not going to win. Okay? So, you know, they would think it was just legitimate to divorce from this law that was written by Moses until Jesus came on the scene. And Jesus told them, you know what? It's been hidden from you for a long time, but that law was given for the hardness of your heart. In other words, God purposely gave you that law to allow you to go follow the sin that you wanted and you weren't going to repent of. You see. That's what happened. So, same thing with Nostra Aetate or Dignitatis Humanae, or, you know, whatever document comes up and there's a question, okay, well, the liberals are going to interpret it the way they want. And since they own 95% of the church, that's the condition of the church today. That's why it's being taught in our universities, in our seminaries, in our high schools. Same garbage, because the liberals control it. Okay? Unfortunately, that's the state of the case. So, same thing with this. You know, you can interpret it two different ways. Okay? I'm, of course, going to interpret it the way the tradition compels me to do that. And I look at Vatican II in exactly the same way. So I'm not going to fall into a trap. Okay? All right. Yeah, it's 5 after 9. I'm going too slow tonight. Okay, Dr. Sungenis, I'm sure you agree with modern science how gravity works. If so, and given the size of our sun, how can the sun rotate around the earth? Okay, so first of all, modern science doesn't know how gravity works. Okay, that's been the stickler for a long time. Newton can give us equations on how gravity operates in the sense of how fast it moves. Okay, we know that the escape velocity of the Earth is what, 9.2 meters per second per second. Why? Well, because the Earth has a certain gravitational attraction, and it's going to take a certain speed to get out of that gravitational attraction. Okay, that's all they can tell you. You know, they can tell you that when Galileo dropped his balls off the tower, his cannonballs off the Tower of Pisa, You know, they went 32 feet per second until they hit the ground. That's what they can tell you about gravity. But they don't know why it happens. They don't know if it's a push, a pull, something in between, or neither. They don't know. Okay, now Einstein came along and said, well, he thought it was the fact that space bends in a gravitational field. He doesn't know that. And the first thing we would ask, any intelligent person would ask, well, what's bending? I thought you told us space was a vacuum. In other words, nothing's there. So what's bending? Okay. So he had a theory about gravity. There's a lot of theories out there about gravity, but nobody's proven how it works. Okay. Now I have my own theory of gravity, and I've written it up in my book. What's it called? A googolplex of tiny black holes. A theory of gravity, inertia, and the speed of light. That's my theory. And I have no proof for it, but that's my theory. Okay, so science is in the same situation. So you say, if so, well, you don't need to know how gravity works. All you need to know is that in a Newtonian gravitational field, the greater the mass of the object, the greater the gravitational field. That's what you would know from Newtonian physics. Okay. Again, you can't prove that, but there seems to be a relationship between the size of the mass and the gravitational field around it. Okay. And if that's the case, then you're saying here, if the sun is bigger, then of course the earth is going to have to rotate. And I would agree with you. Okay. If we were left, and we answer this tonight, if we were left with just the solar system, okay, forget about the other planets, we have a sun and an earth in our solar system. I would agree with you that the earth would have to go around the sun. No questions asked. Okay, this game is over. All right. But what we found as we went on in our science history, 200 years later, a guy named Ernst Mach comes along and says, that was an assumption that Newton made that he can't prove, that we have to stick just with the solar system. Okay, there's a whole universe out there. What are you going to do with that? See all those stars you see at night? Yeah, and if you had the right telescope, every area of the sky you saw would have a star in it. So there's billions and billions of them out there. Okay, and if our sun has gravity, well, don't you think they have gravity too? And we know they're big. So, wow, you add them all together and you got a lot of gravitational field. And does that gravitational field affect us? Well, kind of hard to say it doesn't, because we're right in the midst of it all. Okay, so he says about Newton, look, you can't separate the solar system from the rest of the universe. It's all one big ball of wax. So before you make any equations, you're going to have to consider what forces may be coming from that universe. Okay, that was one thing. Now, he believed in a static universe, a universe that wasn't rotating. Okay, because he wasn't a geocentrist. But then Einstein came along using Mach's ideas and said, all right, well, you got this thing called relativity, relative motion, which means that essentially you can have the Earth rotating in a universe that doesn't move, but you can also have the universe rotating around a fixed Earth. And relativity allows that. And relativity says basically that you would get the same results in both systems. Okay, so here is a physics now that incorporates the rest of the universe with our solar system and comes up with a totally different answer, which says that in the covariance and coequivalence equations that Einstein developed, he had to figure out what would it take for the universe to rotate around a fixed Earth? And there's been a lot of people after him that have done that. Barber and Bertati, Nightingale. You can look these all up in my book, Galileo Was Wrong. They've all figured out the equations for what would have to take place, or what equations would come forth from a fixed Earth with the universe rotating around it. They've worked it all out. Okay, like I said, I'm just the messenger boy, giving you the information. And so what happens? Well, you have this universe rotating, and a universe rotating is going to have angular momentum. Angular momentum is going to create inertial forces, and the inertial forces are going to keep all those stars rotating around the universal axis every day. Okay, it's simple. Okay, as I said, the math has already been done. It's just a matter of going in there and looking at it and saying, wow, you mean this has been hid from me for 400 years? Yeah, more or less it has. Because they're not going to tell you in the universities or the high schools or whatever. They're not going to put it on CBS Evening News, okay? Because it's now their job to keep it all hush-hush. And they don't like people like me bringing it out, because that's going to destroy the little world they made for themselves, wherein now the Earth is in the center of the universe as opposed to it being out there somewhere in space. And if it's in the center of the universe, what's that mean? Well, that means somebody put it there, because it's not going to happen by chance. And that someone happens to be someone who can create a planet called Earth, or an object called Earth, and a sun and stars. And that there's only one that can do that. His name's God. So ultimately, then, the Earth in the center of the universe leads back to God, and that's what they don't like. I can't do that. No, the very reason I went into science is to escape God. So you can't have, you can't put God back into science when I wanted to escape God. Okay, that's what they don't like. So that's the answer to your questions. Let me move on. So you're asking again, same question. I knew somebody would do this. I talked yesterday about a debate I had with James White where I lost my cool. So somebody goes back there and they watched the 1999 debate on the Mass. And he says here, it's very interesting watching you get mad. But he puts mad in quotes. All right, I'm never going to live that one down, I guess, huh? So Lawrence comes in and says, we're going to have a broadcast of that Mass debate tomorrow. Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. I'm going to put you in the shed for that, since you're my 12th child. All right. Here, if the Earth is on a 23-degree axis tilt and the whole universe is aligned on that axis, how do we know that they're tilted? Would you need an exterior reference frame to confirm that? Good question there, Happy Sword. That's exactly right. Okay. You need a reference frame. You need an absolute reference frame, as a matter of fact. Okay. So we could be upside down, as far as we know, if you believe in the heliocentric system, just to take your statements to their logical conclusion. Okay. Because there is no up or down, right or left in a heliocentric kind of universe where everything's in motion. That's the beauty of geocentrism, is you have a fixed object, and you know it's fixed because everything is moving around you, and your Lord who made it told you it's fixed. Okay, so now you have absolute confirmation from Revelation, and that fixed object is going to allow you to measure everything in the universe. And the 23.5-degree tilt that you see is going to be measured against the absolute fixed Earth. All right? So if you see that 23.5-degree tilt goes through certain continents and crosses your equator and goes through other continents at the other end, you know exactly where to put the 23.5-degree tilt, because you have an absolute to start with. That makes it easy. And if you wanted to figure out how far, this star was away or where it was in the universe according to, declination and ascension degrees, that's how they measure those things. You know exactly how to do it. As a matter of fact, that's how they do it in astronomy. They use the fixed Earth. They don't tell you that, but they're using a fixed Earth to figure out where everything is in the universe. They can't use a moving Earth. That would just be too complicated. So they use a fixed Earth. And when NASA sends up its satellites, what do they use? They use the Earth-centered, Earth-fixed frame, ECEF frame. Why? Because it's easy. If you have a fixed Earth, you can measure anything out there. And how much fuel you have to give it to get there, you see, if you have a fixed Earth. They can't use the solar battery-centric frame. That's just too complicated. I mean, they could run the things through the computer and make it easier, but it's still, you have to feed in a lot of data. That's unnecessary if you just use the fixed Earth, okay? So they all know that it works. They just don't want to believe that it actually exists, okay? And there's philosophical reasons for that, as I just mentioned, because most of these scientists go into science because they're atheists. They don't believe in God. They think they're going to figure it out by, adding up molecules and atoms and all kinds of things and come out the other end with a solution for life. That's what they think, the theory of everything, as they call it. And it ain't going to happen, okay? But they think it's going to happen. They think they keep adding data and more data and more data. They'll finally come up with the answer. Philosophy has already told us that doesn't work. From the time of Descartes, Immanuel Kant, Hegel, Kierkegaard, and onward, they know they can't get enough data and keep adding it in there. Someday they're going to come up with the answer. They know it doesn't work. Okay. Same thing here. All right, I'm only going to spend a few more minutes on these questions here, and then I got to get to the board because I see there's a lot of questions there. I understand that from the day of Galileo, things were more difficult to understand. But if 2020, and with all our optics in space, our observations clearly show us rotating around the sun, does it not? No, it doesn't. Okay. And we just got through talking about the only way you can know that thing is moving and you're not is if you have an absolute frame from which to measure, okay, that is not moving. Do you ever sit in a train that hasn't started its trek yet, but it's just slowly pulling out of the station? And you look at the next train next to you and you're wondering, well, which one's moving? Am I moving or are they moving? Have they left before us, or is it we who are going this way? And you can't tell because the trains are moving so slow that there's no inertial forces in your seat. And so you look next to you and you think that they're moving when actually it's you moving, and it might be vice versa. Okay. So that's an example that you can't judge whether that thing is moving or whether you're the one who's moving, and it just looks like that thing's moving. Okay, that's the price you pay for a relative universe. But that's the nature of things. If you want the Earth to move and everything else is moving out there, well, there's no absolute to make your judgment. Okay. All right. Now, there's another thing. So some people say, well, they have satellites out there that show the Earth rotating. No, they don't. Okay? That is, they can't prove it. Because if the universe is rotating around a fixed Earth, what's it doing? It's taking the camera with it, you see? So the camera is the one that's going to move against the fixed Earth. And what it's going to look like? It's going to look like the Earth is rotating because the camera is moving against the Earth, you see? So, does God try to save everyone equally like the Virgin Mary and the Apostle Paul? Well, the Virgin Mary I'm going to set aside, okay? But, she still has a free will. You see, this is why she's blessed, because she used her free will to accept the proposal from God that she be the carrier of his son. She could have refused, you see, because she had a free will. Some people say, come on, Mary's not going to refuse to be the mother of God. Well, then she has no free will. Okay. The church teaches that Mary has a free will. She can decide. And she decided in our favor. Okay. So how God worked that all out, I am not here to be the definitive judge on that, but so I'm going to skip to the Apostle Paul. He's easier to deal with. So now the Apostle Paul, if you read him carefully in his epistles, he'll be the first one to say, look, hey, I'm nothing special. As a matter of fact, I'm the worst of the apostles because I actually went and killed Christians. Okay. And so, I'm the least of the least, so to speak. And only by the grace of God, am I saved. But, there's been occasions where I'd like to give up. Okay. And there have been occasions where I can fall. There are occasions where I think I'm doing good, and God may judge them as stupid. Why did you do that? And so he's always examining himself in almost every epistle that he has. He knows he has a commission given to him from Jesus, and he's going to do it, but he knows he's a human being and he could fall. And he says that about himself. He goes, woe is me if I tell others to do what they should do and I don't do it myself. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. So he's constantly has himself under the microscope. Okay. So, now you might say God wanted to save Paul more than somebody else in the sense that, yeah, if you serve God, you're obedient to him, you devote your life to him like Paul or Abraham or whoever, yeah, God's going to have more favor on you. Yeah. Okay. That's just the facts of the thing. And rightly so. Okay. And God makes no bones about that. He says, I will bless whoever follows me, and you'll get more blessing than this guy over here. And, so there are degrees to how God looks at us. And if I were God, I'd want to save Paul a lot more than somebody else over there who's, wishy-washy about his faith. And, I'm hoping for him too, but, this guy has put in the time and the effort, and, yeah, let's work real hard. Give him the graces that he needs. He has to respond like everybody else has, okay? And so, there is some kind of, you see this all the time in the Old Testament, where God says, I love this man over here. This David guy, he's a man after my own heart. This idiot over here, it's so bad that he's going to wish he was never born. Okay, so he does make those distinctions among people based on how they respond to God. Okay, but we do know this from Paul in 1 Timothy 2:4. God desires all men to be saved. Okay, and that is a fact. So nobody's ever born into this world without a chance to be saved. God wants him to be saved. Okay, and because of our own free will, we decide not to be saved. That's a fact. So, and that's what our church teaches, and she's always taught that for 2,000 years. Dr. Sungenis, what do you think of the so-called Catholic charismatic renewal? They seem to put too much emphasis on certain charisms and that which is tangible. Yeah, I've been in those groups, I think, once or twice, and you see the same thing over and over again. Um, you know, they, let's put it this way. I think there's a lot of things wrong in the Catholic charismatic renewal. Okay? But there may be good people involved in it that have gotten caught up in this whole thing and can't make the proper distinctions because they're not hearing the right information. I met a lot of people like that. Okay? I've met a lot of people also that you give them the right information, they don't want to hear it because they've had an experience of speaking in tongues or some other kind of, ecstatic experience, and that's all they need. That's all they want to hear. You can't argue with their experience, no matter how much Bible information you give them or church teaching or warnings about what you've seen other people fall into, and they're not interested. Okay. And I understand. And in that sense, it becomes like a cult because they close themselves out from any other information that's going to impinge on the experiences that they want to have. And now I've written a whole book on tongues. You can get it on my robertsungenis.org website. And I give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay. I think if you have any interest at all in this, finding out what's going on, you need to read that book, okay? Because there's a lot of deception that occurs in the tongues movement. It's very easy to speak in tongues. You can manufacture it with your own cognitive abilities, and it's called cognitive dissociation. And you can get into those states. It's easy, and you can teach people how to do it. So when I see someone, rattling off in the tongue, it doesn't impress me because I know what's happening. Okay, tongues were given for a reason in the beginning of the church, and all the fathers say that reason has passed away. And there were some saints that were given the gift of tongues, but that was to speak to people of a foreign nation of which he did not know the language, and he was given the gift of tongues to speak in their language. Okay, that's still possible today. Very rare, okay, because we know all the languages of the world now. We can communicate with foreign nations in their own language because we know all the languages. Back in what was it? Who was that? Saint Joachim, was it? I forget the name. It's in my book. But it was given the gift, for a special reason. But see, today that's abused because a lot of people want to have an experience with Jesus or the Holy Spirit. Hey, I do too. Okay? I wish I could just turn it on and fill me, and wow, I'll feel different, and I'll see the whole world differently, and all that. And we all want those experiences, okay? And sometimes when you speak in these tongues, you do get ecstatic, and everything does look different to you. So I can see how powerful the experience can be. But see, what happens to them is it starts to wear off. The exhilaration they feel when they first start speaking in tongues is a lot different than a year or 2 or 3 later. And then it just falls off. They don't do it anymore. And this happens in almost every case. Okay? There's a few holdouts, but it happens. So you know that it wasn't real in the beginning. It was just a feeling they had that was perpetuated by the things that are going on in their mind that allows them to speak in these tongues. And then it becomes a chore, actually. It becomes hard to do because you have to get in the right mood. It's like starting a car, it's like you're starting a car that's not tuned up right. And, and you can't get it started. And then all of a sudden, it'll, 5 minutes later, you hit the gas pedal right and it'll kick in. Some of these older cars work that way. And it'll start. You go, great, okay, problem's over. Well, this is like speaking in tongues. You got to get into the mood. You've got to know the right words to say. You have to let go of any worries that you have. Nobody can bother you. They can't be with you unless you're your best friend. Everything's got to be perfect. And so you're just like, and all of a sudden, you'll begin speaking in tongues because everything starts to click. All that has to happen. But that's hard to get to that point. And so, a year or two later, they're trying, well, let's go to the tongues meeting tonight. Oh, I don't know, go through that again. Because it took, like 20 minutes to get started the last time, and it just exhausted me. And by the time I came home, I was so tired, and I couldn't even go to work the next day. All kinds of things will happen. And, this is what happens to a lot of tongue speakers. I'm just telling you. I've studied it. I've read the books that go into the cultures, like the Mexican culture, for example, where a lot of this takes place, and where we imported a lot of it into the United States. In Notre Dame, for example, oh boy, was in the 60s, 65, 66. Oh man, they were filling the Notre Dame stadium with tongue speakers. Everybody was speaking in tongues. And then like a year later, it all died out. Just totally died out. There wasn't one tongue speaker left. So, where did it go? What was it? Well, it was a made-up experience is what it was. And it was exhilarating when it occurred. But like any other thing like that where it takes too much work, it dies out of its own. Okay? It takes on a life of its own, and it takes on a death of its own, is what happens. So, yeah, be, extra careful when you're in that. Oh, man, it's hard to get through all these questions here, so. Okay. All right. So let me, like I promised, I'm going to go to the other questions we have on the board tonight, see if I can get through some of these. Did you ever debate James White on Sola Scriptura? No, we never did that, did we? Would I? Of course I would. Yeah. Good idea, Lawrence. See if you can put that one together. But I promise I won't stick you in the shed. All right. Yeah, I tried to find that video, Lawrence. I wasn't able to get to it for some reason that you sent. So I don't know what happened there. But thank you for sending it. Yeah, send it again so I can just click on and go. It goes right to it, so I don't have to go searching everywhere. If you could. All right, so we got some new people tonight. All right, and John 1:21, John the Baptist says he is not Elijah. Matthew 11:14. In Matthew 17:11-13, Jesus said John was Elijah to come. Can you clear up the contradiction of why Jesus says John was Elijah, but John denied it? Well, Jesus denied it too. He says, if you can hear it, John was Elijah in the figurative sense. Okay, not that John is Elijah in the real sense. Okay. Elijah was like John because, Elijah was a prophet of his day that was in apostate Israel. Same with John. Israel was on its last legs. It was going to be destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. They were just living out their last years, basically. God was about to give them up. And Elijah was a prophet in his day where it was so bad that he thought he was the only one left. And that's what Paul tells us in Romans chapter 11. He says, he's quoting from Elijah, and he says, Elijah says to God, am I the only one left? And God comes in and answers him and says, no, it may seem that way, but I have 7,000 who haven't bowed the knee to Baal, the false god. Okay, so, wow, 7,000. Okay, well, that's a little encouraging. I'm not the only one. But then you're talking about a nation of approximately 10 million people, if not more, in 800 BC in Elijah's day. Okay, they had at least a million or two coming out of Egypt in the 1400s BC. So this is 600 years hence, and the Israelites were quite, prolific as far as births were concerned, were in view. So, yeah, we're talking about at least 10 million people, and God can only find 7,000. Well, that pretty much tells you the state of Israel when John the Baptist was around. Okay, probably 7,000. So in that sense, they're alike. They're preaching against a great tide of disbelief and apostasy in Israel. Okay, and so that in that sense they're similar. Okay, and that's why Jesus says he's Elijah in the figurative sense. Okay. Now, John, of course, because the people are going to take what Jesus said and they're going to say, Jesus said that John the Baptist is Elijah. Now, he didn't say that, of course. And if he did, it was only in the figurative sense. But they can't think beyond their nose, a lot of these people. And so they're going to go to John. Jesus says you're Elijah, are you? Because they can't think. So John says, no, I'm not. Obviously, I'm not Elijah. Okay. Now, he doesn't go into saying why Jesus said that he was Elijah in the figurative sense, but, I think that answers your question. Okay. Alex Michael, on the previous show, you mentioned that Our Lady of Fatima actually said that Russia will be consecrated, but it will be too late. Yes, I did. Do you have a follow-up to that somewhere? This does make sense in light of the 1931 warning about the fate of King Louis XVI, as well as what is now unfolding around us at the same time. And let's see if you have more follow-up here. The promise that her Immaculate Heart will triumph seems unequivocal, yet this promise seems contingent on the consecration. How do we resolve this, and how does the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary fit in with eschatology, if at all? Well, I am at the point now that I don't think it fits in with eschatology per se, if eschatology is confined to the end times. The end times are defined by when the man of sin arrives, or the man of lawlessness. That's talked about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. That's the mark of the end times, okay? And since that has not occurred yet, okay, in other words, the man of sin has not come yet, then we're not in the end times. And Fatima came before, 100 years before today or so. And so in that sense, it's not eschatological, okay? How we resolve this, now, again, my opinion, okay? But since she did say it will be too late, she's putting a contingency on her own promise. And the promise was partially fulfilled by Pius XII, because he actually did consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary in 1952. It took some time for him to get there, unfortunately, but he did do it. Okay? So in that sense, you could say that he fulfilled what Mary said. That is, they will do the consecration. But since he didn't do it the correct way, then she couldn't fulfill all of the promise that she made. Okay, neither could heaven. and one of the reasons was because it was too late. Because in the same letter that she wrote that it was too late, 1936, she said, Russia will have already released its forces and gone into the world and disrupted it just like I predicted. Okay, so you've got two, irresistible force meeting an immovable object kind of a situation here. Okay, and heaven's going to work it out the way it's going to work it out, but I think I'm giving at least some elasticity to the situation by saying that, Pius did the consecration, but didn't do it properly, and it was too late. So I think that's the way I would fit all the pieces of the puzzle together. And if somebody can come up with something better, I'll be willing to listen. But that's the way I've resolved it in my mind. So, all right, let me go back here. I am new to this channel, Joe says. What group of priests are you associated with? None. I don't want to go into that. I already did. Nazim says, what do you think of St. Newman's view on inerrancy and inspiration? John Newman, the convert from Anglicanism, I assume you're talking about. I have to confess, I don't know exactly what his view of inerrancy and inspiration is. Sorry to say. Newman's one of those guys I have failed to keep up with at my own fault. They love him over there in England, though. I tell you, I've been over there several times. And the place where I was doing my PhD, Maryvale Institute, boy, they love Newman. I went to his little priory over there, and they have a little museum set aside for him. And saw his life, but I couldn't tell you exactly what his view of it. So, Nazim, on these occasions, so if you don't tax my memory, give me what the view is, so I can give my 2 cents on what I think of it. Okay. Sometimes, people think I know too much, and the real truth is I don't know enough, and sometimes I can't zero in on what they think I know because I don't know it. So come back and help me, Nazim. All right. My girlfriend, whom I do not live with, thank you, William, asked where the origins of voodoo come from. Oh, voodoo. That reminds me of something. I don't know where the origins are. That would be an interesting thing. So why don't you look it up, William? Okay, go to Wikipedia, look up voodoo, or type in origins of voodoo. See what you come up with, and you can share it with us. I'm just going to ignore your comment, John, about time management. Gustavo says, Dr. Sungenis, I bought the early church fathers Protestant version. What is different from the Dominican friars version? I don't know. I don't have the Dominican friars version. But you know what? You should find out for us, Gustavo. You could probably pick it up on the internet, Dominican fathers, and see if they follow Philip Schaff's commentary. That'd be interesting to know. All right. All right. Catechism, paragraph 2358 states, in regards to gays, they do not choose their homosexual condition. For most of them, it is a trial. Romans 1:26 states, for this reason God gave them over to degrading passions. All right, Rockstar, do you have a follow-up on that? Catechism, paragraph 2351 states, sexual pleasure is morally disordered when sought for itself, isolated from its procreative and unitive purposes. Okay. Does the first part mean it is sinful for husband and wife to have sex for the sake of having sex? All right, so I got two different questions here, I guess, from you. What did you want me to do with the first one here? You say Catechism 2358 states they do not choose their homosexual condition. For most of them, it is a trial. Well, I don't think that the last word has been said about the origins of homosexuality. Okay. I used to minister to some homosexuals a long time ago, trying to get them out of the homosexual lifestyle. And I have to say that it was one of the most difficult things I've ever tried to do. None of them got out of it, as far as I know. And so I can say that for number one. There may be occasions where you've got an overbearing mother and a weak father, and sometimes you got an overbearing father and a weak mother. Something's out to kilter, okay? And then you may have an uncle who's, a little fruity, and he might have some influence. So the kid's growing up in this crucible of who knows what's going to happen. And he hits puberty, and he is filled with all kinds of confusing thoughts. Okay, that's one thing. It's also normal for adolescent boys to have man crushes. Okay. You don't hear talk about that in the locker room too much. That's the last place you're going to hear it. But you sit a boy down and, get down to the nitty gritty, that may come out. Okay. Got a man crush. Perfectly normal. Okay. Not that it's good. Okay. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying these are the phases we go through. And you eventually come out of that, and you realize, and you look back and you realize, oh gosh, I thought those thoughts. And because you mature, your mind matures, your sexual nature matures, and you come to a point of understanding who you are. And boy, that's tough when you go into puberty. Everything's changing, and it seems like the whole world is based on your body, so and if you don't hit that right and come out of it right, you may have some problems. Okay. And you may have some tendencies, and they may not just be homosexual. Okay. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of this. I think you get the gist of what I'm saying, but that's very possible. And I think a lot more people struggle with it than, especially in our culture. When you have the total antithesis of the Victorian culture as we do today, Okay, you have all those external influences coming into that crucible, and you don't know what you're going to get. And this is what the society pays for. You teach that stuff, don't be surprised if your kids turn out that way. Okay, by the truckloads. And then it gets to the point where it becomes so prominent that the teacher in your school is now homosexual. Or you have a, like in Pennsylvania, our what is she, the health advisor or something, is a transvestite or transsexual. And she's given advice on, she or he given advice on how to deal with COVID. And senators, congressmen, yeah, they're going to be gay. And you teach this to your kids, they're going to turn out this way. You don't put limits on it and condemn it, this is what's going to happen. Okay? So we know that it can be a condition that comes from the culture that you're in. And if the normal combatants against deviance are not there, then yeah, you can expect for a high percentage of your population to be gay, lesbian, whatever they come out to be. Okay, where we're in right now, the United States. Okay, but the same thing goes for heterosexual tendencies. The pornography that is rampant on the internet and among men today in America it's astronomical. Okay. Or adultery, it's off the charts. Okay. And go down the list of sexual deviance. So it's not just homosexuality. Now, these are all sins that God still says to us, yeah, you may have grown up in it. You may not have chosen it, but it's wrong and you need to stop it. Okay? And if he tells us to stop it, that means we have the power to overcome it. It may be hard. Yeah, if you lived a life of sin, it may be hard to overcome all those sins, at least all at once. But what I'm trying to say is, it doesn't make any difference whether you were taught it, brought up with it, inherited it, or assimilated it, or just fell into it because you wanted it. Doesn't make any difference. God doesn't go into the origin of the sin. In any case, he tells us to stop sinning. Okay? In any case. Okay? So, in other words, you can't use that excuse that, well, gee, I wasn't, I didn't choose this, it just sort of came upon me. No. That's just an excuse. Because you have the power to fight it, to conquer it. If that wasn't the case, then God wouldn't have said it. And if it's not the case, then God is lying to us, that we have the power to overcome it. They don't overcome it because they don't want to overcome it. Okay? It's like any sin. Why do people keep sinning? Because they like their sin. They like to sin. They don't want to be holy. Okay? That's the issue. If you want to be in God's camp, you have to be holy. That's what he wants. That's all he wants. And it's very simple formula. You have to be holy. That's the kind of God he is. Okay? And if that's what he is, that's what he wants. Those are the only people he's going to accept. And there's no excuses. No excuses. All right? So that's how I would deal with that. All right. 5 more minutes. Sorry, folks. I didn't get through all the questions this week. Dr. Sungenis, any tips for managing a house with a lot of children? How do you handle meals, shopping, chores, schooling? Oh, man, you got to talk to my wife. She's the expert. Man, she full of love, but man, she runs this place like a military institution. Yeah, and you know, just popping in and giving encouragement every once in a while and letting them know that she loves them dearly, but man, they're put to work. Okay, so you have to delegate to your children all the things that they can do that leaves you up to go do the things that you need to do. Let's say, you know, shopping. But now my older daughter now does some shopping for us. So mom gives her a list, go out and buy it. It was first, you know, she missed a couple things in the first round, but she eventually got it. Schooling, boy, we've been through the mill with that one. We homeschool. We got that down to a science, I'm telling you. We get that done in 2 hours, if that. And my kids are all A students and get, you know, raving reviews from the Homeschooling Association and the state that has to examine us every once in a while. And, you know, they get A's and B's in college. And so that's all well worth it, by the way, once you get that homeschooling done. But you only have to spend, and they all do it themselves. Can you believe that? You know, you teach them to read. That's the most important thing. Once they learn to read and read proficiently, they can do anything. They can pick up a book, read it themselves, and all my kids teach themselves now. Every once in a while, we'll come in, you know, you have a little problem. I can't figure this one out, and we'll give them the answer. But that's it. It's over. So, yeah, we've got it down to a science. It just works really well. And my wife should write a book on this, I'm telling you. She's just, well, she dedicates herself to it. You know, I mean, she always finding the best way to do something. Always looking for something that will make it easier. She's always on a learning curve. And God bless her, I'm telling you. She just, you have to have that desire, like she does, to constantly learn. And because I think we've gone through maybe 4 or 5 different homeschooling programs, and some of the first ones, like, oh my gosh, we're there all day. You know, no, that's not practical. And so we got rid of that one. Then we got another one. It was a little better and would have had some kinks in it. And so we basically have an eclectic approach to it now. And we've got it down to where we got it where, you know, they're doing most of the work themselves. So, yeah. And, you know, never forget, it's the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. So you can make it very simple. All right, so it's 10 o'clock. I got to go because I started this show when I was tired tonight. And I got to go. So I'm just gazing at the William says, Dr. Sungenis, I have 12 children, 2 cats, 1 dog, and a partridge in a pear tree. Just want to share this with you. Thank you. I hope you're telling me the truth. So the way I would rate I have 11 children, 1 cat, 2 dogs, 6 fish. So, and some stray cats that come over and try to bother us from the neighbors. Anyway, all right, so we got to go. I'll see you guys all next week. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question this week. I keep trying, but hope I've been helpful to you. If you would, as I said at the beginning of the program, please stop over at robertsongenis.org. Take a look at our selection of books and CDs and DVDs and all kinds of Ds. For your reading pleasure, for your learning pleasure, and for our pleasure, of course, because it helps us to keep this ministry going. And we also have a donation button there. Don't forget that. And your donations are tax deductible because we are a 501c3, tax exempt, nonprofit corporation under the U.S. tax laws. So feel free to help us anytime you can. Until next week, God bless you, be safe, and keep the faith. Bye-bye.